Okay, so let's continue with Derech Hashem. Um, last time we started Parak Gimel, the third Parak, which is in the third part of the Sefer. This Parak is devoted to Ruach HaKodesh and Nevuah. And it's not only a fascinating Parak in the Derech Hashem, because he gives a real Ramchal, concise, and in a certain sense simple, yet very deep explanation of what each of these things are. Ruach HaKodesh, which loosely translates to a divine inspiration, and the Nevuah, is prophecy. Not only does he define each of them, but he contrasts them. And that is particularly fascinating to me. Okay, so last week we read the first two paragraphs where the Ramchal explains, number one, the difference between Ruach HaKodesh and kind of your typical way of learning knowledge. The natural way of attaining knowledge is through observations, studying the world in front of us and applying our minds to analyze, and to compare, contrast, and to delve deeper into understanding it. And that's perhaps kind of the essence of the math and the sciences. But then there's an entirely different way of achieving knowledge, and that is through a divine means, and that is Ruach HaKodesh. That's exactly what it is. And the Ramchal described it as information that HaKodesh Baruch Hu himself bestows upon the person, just like a blessing, like he just drops it into their mind. That's it, poof, now they know it. And in regards to Ruach HaKodesh, what we saw last week was that the Ramchal specifies two ways in which it's different than scientific knowledge. Number one is that it's with complete clarity, whereas scientific knowledge, we only know as much as we can figure out. And there are countless questions and countless areas which remain hypothesis, remain theoretical, a lot of theory, and a lot of this is our best guess at how to explain, the certain phenomenons that we observe. I think COVID-19 is a great example of that, where there's been just so much unknown within the scientific world. Because
I don't want to upset anybody, but I just read an article that before people have symptoms, the false positive rate is huge.
The false positive rate.
I'm sorry, I'll take it back. The
false negative.
False negative rate is huge. In other words, when you don't have symptoms, you don't have positivity on the test either.
Got it. Meaning, even though the person might have it in another 2 days.
They're looking for asymptomatic carriers, and it's failing. But that's just for one particular test.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So that's a great example.
I just pulled the article.
There you go. Okay. Okay. So that's difference number one, is that scientific knowledge is only as clear as the available observations are, but there's countless questions that remain, whereas Ruach HaKodesh is with total clarity. Number two is the nature of the knowledge. Scientific knowledge, mathematics, etc., are only limited to knowledge that is physical and is present. But Ruach HaKodesh opens up the possibility to attain knowledge which could be relevant to knowing the future or knowing certain hidden things. That's the language of the Ramchal. Ha'asidos v'hanustaros. Okay, so now let's continue on to the new information. We're up to now paragraph Gimel, number 3. V'ulam, however, madregos al madregos nimsu b'davar. There are many, many levels when it comes to Ruach HaKodesh, this divine inspiration, many different levels. Bein b'inyan koach hasheva nishpa, in many, many different levels and many different areas. Number one is koach hasheva hanishpa. Number one is the strength of the shefa, strength of the inspiration. Excuse me for 1 minute. Sorry about that. So variable number one is koach hashefa handishpa, the strength of the flow, if you will, the strength to which Hashem is bestowing that on a person. Hashem could really blow someone away with a certain Ruach HaKodesh, or just kind of trickle a little bit of inspiration in there. Bein bizman hishafo, there could be a difference in terms of timing of it. Bein b'derech hagio el ha'adam, the way that it comes to the person. The element number three, b'mahus hadvar mamsgalin v'nodaim lo al yidei zeh, the essence of the matter which is becoming revealed and known to him. Amnon b'chulam tia hashpa b'derech sheyargish ba hamushpa b'veru. What all of this has in common is that the person, the recipient, is very clearly aware that it's happening. He feels it. He knows that Hashem is telling him something. Achein od yikra, there's another happening. Sheyushpa b'leva adam shefa, something could come to the heart of the person. Shamideu al tochen inyan ma'inyanim, which causes him to come to an understanding of some type of matter. Ach lo yargish bo hamushpa, but he doesn't know it. Meaning he doesn't know that Hashem is doing this. Hashem's putting it in his heart. Ella commissionofelos machshava b'levavo v'yikara zeh. Oh, sorry. Ella commissionofelos machshava b'levavo. It's like just having an epiphany. It just kind of falls in there. That type of idea. He doesn't know the difference between whether it's coming from HaKodesh Baruch Hu or whether it just that light bulb moment where he stumbles upon a certain discovery. This is loosely referred to as Ruach HaKodesh, even in the words of Chazal themselves, the words of our sages. O hashpa'a nisteres, sometimes it's referred to as a hashpa'a nisteres, a hidden influence. Aval Ruach HaKodesh be'emes ushiyan nikar v'nirgesh bever l'ba'ala v'kumish zachar. Real Ruach HaKodesh is when the recipient is aware of it. So this is an interesting subtlety that the Ramchal is revealing to us, that it's possible for a person to have a divine inspiration where something comes to them somewhat out of nowhere. They just, all of a sudden, they realize it clicks, or that light bulb. Sometimes that is coming from Hashem. Hashem, it could be putting something into the person's heart, feeding them a certain inspiration, a certain knowledge, and they're totally unaware of where it's coming from. However, that writes the Ramchal, if you really want to be accurate with your terminology, that would not be called Ruach HaKodesh. Sometimes it's loosely referred to that way, and there is such a concept out there. The Ramchal is not dismissing that. But that's not real Ruach HaKodesh. Real Ruach HaKodesh is when the person is very clearly aware that it's happening. That is real Ruach HaKodesh. So that's an interesting idea. It makes you wonder with some of these big tzaddikim today, where they, people claim that they have some type of divine knowledge, because they seem to know a little too much. They seem to know things that that they would have no way of knowing, which remains to be. I don't have any firsthand knowledge if those reports are accurate or not. But what I wonder is, assuming that those reports are accurate, are those tzaddikim themselves aware of it? Meaning, do they know that HaKodesh Baruch Hu is communicating with them? Are they on that level, indeed, of what the Ramchal would call true Ruach HaKodesh? Or are they just getting that kind of light bulb, which is loosely referred to as Ruach HaKodesh, but it's not the real deal? I don't know. I don't think we'll ever know, because even if they are aware of the fact that HaKodesh Baruch Hu is telling them things, I think that they are going to keep it their own little secret. And it's probably wise for them to do that. Okay, let's continue now with, we're up to paragraph Daled, number 4. Above all of this, even the level of Ruach HaKodesh, where Hashem himself is bestowing knowledge on the person, there is a level that's even above all of that. And what's that? What is that level? Vihi HaNevuah. That is prophecy. So prophecy is a cut above. It's a whole different, an entirely higher level. V'inyana, its concept is shegia ha'adam v'yiskasher b'bori yisborach shmo. A person should reach and should be tied to his creator, v'yizdabegu dveikos mamish, and he should be linked, clinging to HaKodesh Baruch Hu, ba'ofen, in such a way, sheyargish ha'izdabkos. He could feel it. He could feel attached to Hashem, v'yazeg mashu misdabek bo, and he grasps the fact that he is attached to HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Dahainu kvodo yisborach shmo, that being Hashem's honor, not to Hashem himself. So this is touching on an idea that we have in Chazal, that Hashem himself is doesn't have a tangible being that someone could literally cling to. But kavodo, his honor, that's what the person is connecting to. Al derech shenevoyer lifnim, as we've explained previously. V'yeh hadavar bar etzlo umurgash mimenu bli safek kla. This is something that the Navi, the prophet, is very clear to him. He feels it, and there's no doubt about it. Kederech shelo yistabek v'davar gashmi shagisheh b'chusha. Just like you've got no question about something physical that you feel with your senses. Person burns themselves, they feel a burn. Person tastes something. Person, any of those senses that you smell something, there's no doubt about it. When the Navi experiences this nevuah, this prophecy, which is an experience of clinging, connecting to HaKodesh Baruch Hu, it's something that he feels, and he has no doubt about it. V'hinei, ikar hanevuah hu, the primary element of prophecy, hasigat vekos v'akesha hazeh, od b'chaim, shezeh shleimus gadol v'andai. The main concept of true prophecy is exactly this. It's achieving this connection with HaKodesh Baruch Hu while the person is still living, which is a tremendous level of shleimus. This is the idea of the Ramchal that we've mentioned earlier in the beginning of the Sefer, the completion of man, the perfection of man. Prophecy is a level of that completion and that perfection where the person is linking to HaKodesh Baruch Hu himself. What comes along with this is certain knowledge and certain information. A person can grasp certain truths and certain very lofty ideas. Amongst the deepest secrets of HaKodesh Baruch Hu himself. Not only can the prophet grasp these things, but he grasps them with clarity. Derech haskala hanishpa'as shezocharnu, with this bestowed enlightenment that we've mentioned, to a greater degree than that of those who are receiving Ruach HaKodesh, the divine inspiration that we mentioned before. As he will explain further. Okay, so far what the Ramchal is telling us is that Nevuah prophecy is different in that the prophet is experiencing not just a receiving of knowledge, which is the Ruach HaKodesh, but it's the person himself is becoming connected to HaKodesh Baruch on a very, very high level, where they can feel it. They feel the connection to HaKodesh Baruch Hu, and it's through that connection that they become privy of certain divine knowledge. It's kind of, all part of the package. Part of becoming linked to HaKodesh Baruch Hu on that high level is that then they then become exposed, aware of, certain things that one can only know when they, through that experience of becoming that close to HaKodesh Baruch Hu himself. Okay. So here's a fascinating twist that the Ramchal adds. The way for grasping this are through very specific means. It is a person cannot cling to Hashem, cannot grasp Hashem's honor the way we see our fellow man right in front of us. It happens through certain messengers. That these messengers, referring to certain angels, certain spiritual beings, they facilitate this connection and this awareness, this knowledge of the prophet, just like an amazing metaphor from the Ramchal here, just like the glass, the lens is to the eye. The Mesharsim, the messengers of Hashem, provide the Navi, the prophet, with certain visions, just like the lens provides the eye with vision that it would not otherwise have. Fascinating. It's through them, it's through these Mesharsim, through these messengers, that the prophet grasps Hashem's honor. However, what he's grasping is not the Navi, but it's Hashem's honor. The angels only acting as the means, as the go-between. However, the way that it's received by the prophet will vary depending on the means by which he's receiving the message. So the way the nature of the messengers and the nature of the chain or the transmission, which is going to the prophet, will greatly affect what the prophet is experiencing and what he grasps. Like a vision which has clarity. You get at different levels, either distant or close. A clarity of vision or a clouding of that vision. So even though the prophet is coming in contact with HaKodesh Baruch Hu, he's connecting to HaKodesh Baruch Hu, and he is becoming exposed and aware of divine knowledge. But, says the Ramchal, it happens through a medium, through a messenger that transmits the message, through certain angels, and depending on exactly which messengers and how and when and the nature of that transmission, that will greatly affect what exactly the prophet experiences and how much he grasps. Vihine. So now he's gonna explain this a little further. But this is where we get into different prophets have their own unique prophecy, and that they're not all the same. Let's continue. V'hine, behold, v'higaloso yisborach shmo uvehashafa shifo ala navi. When Hashem reveals himself and when he bestows his influence on the prophet, yigbar alav tigbar's gadol. The prophet undergoes an experience where he's being totally overwhelmed. This tremendous gevura, strength, is placed down upon him. Umiyad chamro v'kol evrei gufo yizda'azu v'chashu l'safech. Immediately, his entire physical being and all of his limbs of his body begin to shake, and he feels like he's being turned inside out. That's the language of the Ramchal. Totally, when the prophet is receiving prophecy, he has this totally overwhelming experience that kind of overwhelms his physical body. This is the nature, this is just kind of the laws of the physical existence. A physical material, including the human body, doesn't tolerate a spiritual revelation of that magnitude. It's not designed for that. So when it happens, the Navi experiences this very overwhelming experience. Kol shekain gilu kvodu yisbarach shemo. All the more so a revelation of Hashem's own honor. V'nei hargashos of yibatzlu. All of his senses disappear. V'gam pulos of hanafshios lo yifalu klal me'atzmam. His the way they translate it here is his mental faculties, but to the faculties of the soul, if you will, they become totally. He loses his independence. His mental faculties do not operate as they normally would, independently through his own choice. It's all entirely dependent on Hashem and the shefa, the flow that he's receiving. So not only does he experience this totally physically overwhelming experience, but he shuts down. He loses his physical autonomy, even his thoughts. He loses control of his thoughts, and it's totally 100% an experience of what he's receiving from HaKodesh Baruch Hu's shefa, what HaKodesh Baruch Hu is kind of pouring down on him. Okay. Okay, let's continue. Just a funny metaphor to this, just when I was reading this, I was thinking of The Matrix. Are you familiar with that? And I saw Andy's. Yeah, I'm talking about the movie. So it was many years ago that I saw it, before I was in yeshiva long enough to abandon watching movies. there's part of
About 25 years ago.
what?
I'd say about 25 years ago.
There you go. So that would add up appropriately. So when I was still in my pre-yeshiva years, so I saw that movie. Great movie. Anyways, the one part of the plot is that the people who are kind of beating the system or trying to beat the system, so to speak, can plug into the matrix, and they have this thing that they like plug into the back of their head or something, and then their body shuts down, and then they enter the matrix, right? And they're like
The other way around. I thought it was a very Hasidic kind of thing, that all these people were living in independent pods, which the aliens were using to suck the energy out of them. And
yes. So
imagination, they're like imagining things simultaneously all over the place, and these people were able to get out of that and experience things through their own senses and not through the matrix.
yes, correct. But they also had a way that they would plug into the matrix to do certain whatever. I forget why that was necessary, but to interact.
Well, they have to figure out when there were people, there were like policemen out there who were trying to get people who had broken out of the matrix and subdue them.
Exactly right. So that whatever that was the muscle that they kind of plug into this alternate reality, and then their body shuts down, and then they're kind of experiencing something different. Obviously, lahavdil elf havdalas. What?
But that's the way the Hasidim say it is that we're basically all simultaneously dreaming something that Hashem's putting in us, that we're not really existing.
Right.
That we're all simultaneously perceiving things that are congruent. So I'm looking at you I'm looking at the computer, which has everybody in there, and we're all doing the same thing at the same time, but it's really just an imagination thing. We're not really doing it.
So what we're experiencing, well, the Ramchal is not going to that extreme. The Ramchal,
yeah, I'm saying this is more like what Hasidim say, is that this isn't the real life.
So it could be that the Ramchal would agree to that, meaning there's a physical reality, a physical realm, and then there's the spiritual reality, and what we experience, what we see, is reality. That the Ramchal seems to be taking that position, but it's only the physical reality, and then there's also a spiritual reality that we don't necessarily see, we're not necessarily aware of. But the Navi kind of leaves much of his physical interface behind when he connects to that spiritual realm through the Nevuah. That's what it seems like. But it's not that he's like entering the spiritual realm and then he kind of like can exist within the spiritual realm with his own autonomous exploration, etc. That's not at all the way the Ramchal is describing Nevuah. It's shutting down the physical existence, and then he's just kind of receiving, and kind of totally dormant, totally passive maybe is the better word. And HaKodesh Baruch Hu is just kind of imbuing him with this kind of divine experience, which comes with it, divine knowledge. Okay, let's continue. Let's see if we can, in these last 7 minutes, we can wrap up the chapter. There's not much left here. Okay, v'hine mitzad hizdabekus shenishmoso mistabekes. Regarding the clinging that his neshama clings to Hashem, he takes about mitzius haskala. He gets this additional element of intellect. Chutz neged kol haskala hanushis the gamri. totally separate and beyond your typical human intellect. This intellect is not it's not intrinsic in of himself, and it's not coming from him himself, the person, the Navi. This knowledge is coming from a result of that higher divine root, him linking to that. So then, whatever he grasps is going to be a much further, much higher beyond whatever he could grasp on his own. In this regard, the prophet is greater than the one receiving Ruach HaKodesh, even in terms of the knowledge that he's able to grasp. The prophet, his receptors transcend the human capacity. The prophet, but his receptors transcend human capacity, meaning he's not the Ruach HaKodesh, the way the Ramchal is describing it. Ruach HaKodesh is the person remains in a typical human physical state, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is just bestowing knowledge upon him from a divine source, as opposed to be learning the knowledge, the good old-fashioned way, either by studying or by observing, by examining, etc. That's Ruach HaKodesh. Nevuah is a superhuman experience. Nevuah is where the Navi enters a level which is beyond the physical realm, and therefore he's able to receive knowledge that Ruach HaKodesh is not able to provide, because Ruach HaKodesh ultimately is going to be limited to what a human mind can grasp. But a Navi is able to receive knowledge which is beyond what the human mind can grasp, because he is having this experience, this outer body experience, for lack of better words, where he's being linked to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. The revelation of Hashem's honor, that is kind of the active element of whatever the prophet is becoming aware of in his prophecy. So this is the interesting point. Here's how the transmission happens. It's Hashem's, the revelation of Hashem's honor becomes the source of the prophecy, and it's transmitted to the Navi, through the element of imagination that is within the prophet's soul. The Yitzuru bo inyanim, images are conjured up, mashiyuchrach bo mikoach hagila elyon, which are, hard to translate these words, which are created, which are a result of this divine revelation. V'lo mitzad atzmo klal. They are not at all coming from the prophet himself. Mitoch hadimyonos haheim timoshech bo machshava v'haskala. From those images result in thoughts and intelligence, intellect. That is how prophecy happens. Shechakikasa tia mikoyach hakavod hamizgala. That its nature is a result of the this revelation of Hashem's honor, and it remains set in his intellect. Even when he returns to his human faculties, to his regular mundane existence, he retains that knowledge with clarity. So that's the kind of the flow, the stages of transmission. This is the rule, the general rule of how prophecy works for all prophets. However, the specific different levels are multitudinous. As I have explained, as I will explain with Hashem's help. And above all is the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah testifies about him. There will never stand a prophet amongst the Jewish people like Moshe Rabbeinu, who knows Hashem face to face. So this is where the Ramchal concludes the chapter that there are, every Navi experiences something of the nature that the Ramchal described. The process is the same. However, the level, the clarity, and the means by which, the exact means by which the prophecy is transmitted varies from prophet to prophet. And the highest level of all, of the most direct connection, with the most direct transmission, with the ultimate clarity, that is Moshe Rabbeinu, and that there will never be another prophet amongst the Jewish people who will achieve that level of prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, shekayach for joining everyone.